Hello. Welcome to our first ever. Oh man, I'm so nervous. Wow, I wasn't expecting to be this nervous.
It's
Hi,
okay.
welcome
Did you
to our
need
first.
take a deep breath? It's okay.
Maybe we should have grounding exercise before we start too.
I can only do like candid. I can't do staged. All right. Well, welcome to the first episode of our Talk About Traumatized podcast. I do want to give a trigger warning. If it's not evident by the title of our podcast, we are going to be talking about heavy subjects. Specifically, we will be talking about sexual assault. We will say the R word, physical assault, self-harm, and suicide ideation. I don't know if all of that will be in today's episode, but it will be main topics that we're covering on this podcast. So if those are things you cannot handle listening to or might be triggering for you, I suggest you log off and listen to another podcast, maybe one with a little bit more lighter tones. But we're here to talk about the heavy stuff because I don't think enough people are. And I think there's enough people on this planet interested in hearing about it, because while we're all not talking about it, we're all simultaneously experiencing it, which is why we're here to talk about it today. So, viewer discretion advised, and welcome to our podcast. So, I guess we can kind of just get into who we are. I introed, so I guess I'll just go first. My name is Natalie Vaughn. I am from Illinois. I currently am going to school. My major is public and nonprofit administration with a minor in women and gender studies. I have a son and a loving partner, and I don't really have anything else to introduce myself with.
Okay. Well, I am Tiffany Day. I am also from Illinois. Currently, I live in Florida. I have 4 obnoxious dogs and a cat. And currently, I am doing nothing but this podcast and taking care of like my nieces and nephews. So
I'm Gigi. I was born in Australia and I moved to the United States like 10 years ago. I train horses and I perform with them. And I'm currently living in Georgia. That's about it.
Hi, I'm Reese. I am from Maryland originally, and I moved down here with my family when I was about 7. So I've been here forever now. I am married with 2 kids. I'm currently working on this podcast and going back to school for psychology because I am a big believer in knowing how people work and how their brains work, and I find it very fascinating. And I like to get to know people, and I like to hear their stories. I think that's very important. I think their story definitely gives you all the ins and outs you need to know about the person. So that's me. So
Yeah. Well, I guess we got the hard part out of the way, the introductions. So obviously I already said it before, this podcast is about sexual assault, and I'm certain there are probably people listening thinking, why in the heck am I listening to these 4 random strangers talk about it? None of them have degrees or are technically qualified in any field. We all have our own stories, and we all have had our own experiences with individuals that have led us all to being connected and have been able to form a relationship with each other where we feel like we can openly discuss the things that have happened in our lives and openly share our feelings, and then on top of it also laugh at things, joke about things. We have built a relationship based on communication, and the subject that brought us together was our trauma, which is why we want to talk about it together, because we all 4 have different perspectives. We all 4 have our own situations, which offer a very broadened view of people's experiences and how they experience them. And I think, at least for me, one of my biggest goals with it is like kind of like being the big sister of the internet, being the big sister that I didn't have when I needed somebody. Um, because we're not really going to just be focusing on the actual assault so much as things that led up to it, and then all the ramifications after, and where we are now and how we got here, and then even further on how we can improve or unlearn certain things that we learned in the process of our lives that brought us here. So yeah, that is pretty much, at least for me, one of the big focuses. I still have another thing to read, but I figured it was probably good to like summarize
Yeah.
why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's a topic that it got a lot of attention, during the Me Too movement. It was very big. People were telling their stories, people were talking about it. And then it just feels to me that it kind of dropped off. Like, there are still people talking about it, there are still people telling their stories, but it's not getting the attention that it got during that movement, when with all the hashtags on X and like stories on Facebook and stuff like that. And it's just, obviously it's because it's a very uncomfortable topic for people. And like, I think one of our biggest goals is just to make it less taboo to talk about what happened and how it affected you, and most importantly how it affected you, and to go into like the psychology of it. Because, and I think for me, understanding why I reacted the way I did, and why um things affected you the way they do, is very important, and it helps in the process of healing and addressing the trauma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think actually you said a really important word, at least for me, was the destigmatization. Um, it is such a stigmatized topic. It's one of the reasons it's so hard to come forward
Mm-hmm.
and share your truth with the world, because you will be faced with backlash and judgment, but you also know that everyone's perception of you is going to change when you
Mm-hmm.
do. It's unavoidable, whether it's good change or bad change, right? Some people become more supportive and other people fall off because of their
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortability. But we want to break that barrier. We don't want to shame people or make people feel bad. In fact, I hope we inspire people to embrace their truth and embrace their path and their life journey
Mm-hmm.
in order to continue on a path of healing. I think all of us, at least as I've known all of us, have been very focused on healing, and that looks different for every single one of us. We're all on different paths. We're all at different points in that bubble too.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think any of us like just we are all at a point in life where we have, at least to some degree, had to acknowledge certain things that have happened to us, and then beyond that had to do things to get us to a better point after that. Reese, it's all you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
You're
No,
all
I think it also adding in the fact that it can be very dark for some people in the beginning when they're trying to get their way out of their trauma, especially when it first happens. A lot of people know exactly what happened to them at first, or they do come to learn it later on in life, and it's very very staggering. It kind of knocks you down, and you don't really realize how deep you are in the rabbit hole until you start digging your way out. And sometimes people just have a hard time doing that. So I think hearing the stories and hearing actually some of it, the psychological part, helped me out to realize why my brain is working the way it is, and that it's not my fault, and that I can do better, because I know that this is all part of being traumatized and coming back from it as well. So I feel like that's a lot of the reasons why I think that the stories pertaining to us at least will help, because our differences on, when we found out that it happened and how we dug ourselves out are definitely going to be different. And I hope that, somebody who's listening will have like similar situations and can be like, okay, well, at least I know the steps that other people have taken and, try to work that in with theirs and really get somewhere.
Well said.
That was really
It was. I'm super excited to get started with this podcast because to me, just us doing Zoom calls and everything in preparation to start filming has kind of felt like when we used to go to group, which we can get into later on how we met. But in short, that is how we met, through a sexual assault center. And it basically just felt like you could connect with a bunch of people who, even though your stories weren't exactly the same, maybe have had the same emotions during something that was kind of similar. And it was like an open space where we could just talk. And I'm kind of hoping that we'll travel through to whoever's listening, and then we can just have one big giant group. And they can listen to our stories, and we can listen to their stories and their worries and our worries, and just share experiences.
Yes, I'm piggybacking off of you because the way you said it is absolutely exactly how I imagined it. Like, when I dreamed of a podcast, it was because I want to share that group experience because it was so cathartic. It was, at least for me, the best step I took on my journey, at least thus far. Which, Tiffany, thank God for you. Me and you did it together, baby. But yeah, it was like that first day meeting both you, Reese, and you, Gigi. I felt safer sharing my life and what had happened to me than I had ever felt before. And we don't have enough safe spaces on this planet. And it's really, really important for me, but I also know for all of us, for this to be such a safe space for everyone involved. And that means listeners and us, right? Like, we are in a, what is the word? Two-way relationship. And I hope that what this gives to us also gives to other people too.
Symbiotic, I think, is the
That
word.
is the word.
For both benefit. Yes. And you know what's funny is I picked up a pen out of my pile today to take notes and stuff while we're reading, and it's actually the Ocala Sexual Assault Center pen. And you know what? Going back to you saying we don't have enough safe spaces, and we don't, and it's a shame because also the safe spaces that we do have are closing because the sexual assault center here in Ocala is no longer having groups. They're no longer open as far as that goes. So I mean, we lost that. I stopped going a long time ago because of like depression issues, and then you moved away, and then like we all just sort of like whatever. And I actually, the catalyst was when Maureen left. Yeah. And it's sad because there are like 1,270 people a day who get assaulted and raped. And our places, our connections, and our resources, it seems like, are getting smaller and smaller every day. And the number of people who are experiencing these things is getting higher every day. Yeah.
I actually just want to bounce off that because it is. And it's not a coincidence whatsoever. So last year, whenever I was first feeling super, super inspired with just my desires to help people, especially SA survivors, I reached out to our local ICASA, which is the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And I was able to meet up with one of the ladies there. And when I did meet up with her, it just so happened to be the exact day that they found out about their budget cuts for the year. And I live in Illinois, which, if you don't know, has Chicago. And because of Chicago is a very progressive state. If this is happening in Illinois, I can only imagine how much worse it is. and majority of other states in this country in terms of what they're willing to cut funding for and what resources are dying out because of that lack of funding. But it is not a coincidence that places are closing. They are cutting funding, and they are making it a lot harder for people to get help and to connect with others, which is why I want to bridge that gap so badly.
Yeah.
So, does anybody else have anything to say on like pretty much like why we're starting it? Because I can pull up my little thing that I wrote out to read for it.
I think you should read your thing.
Yeah, I think you should read the thing.
Okay, perfect. So I wrote a little blip about what this podcast means to me. It was probably in December I texted Tiff about it. Like when I just like the idea had been ruminating in my head for months and months. But you know, like it obviously all my idea included 3 other people who I did not know how they felt about like being online and then on top of it talking about their assault online because it is kind of
Personal.
yes, very personal. And then me and Tiff had just been talking a lot, so finally I like sent the text. I was like, this is just like what's going through my head. And then you were so receptive, and then literally like everything you said before, Gigi, just about like how excited you are, because it is like even the sessions where we were just like going over podcast stuff, like talking to you guys literally makes me feel so much better. Being able to like openly communicate to people who I don't have to like make understand me is just so nice and refreshing. But I did write, so like I wrote out a little blip, which we kind of talked about little things in here, but I am just going to read from it because I just kind of want the world to know why this podcast means so much to me. So it was in that room at the sexual assault center in Ocala, Florida, that I realized that I was going to spend my life, what I was going to spend my life doing. There were more people there that day than I had ever seen before. We had scaled out far beyond the normal couches, and people had pulled up chairs all around our typically small circle. I observed the faces of everyone in the room as we went from person to person sharing our story. Domestic violence, grooming, molestation, rape, kidnapping, murder, each horror feeling somehow worse than the last. Despite it, we all listened, cried, and even laughed at one another's sad self-narrative. There was a level of safety that I found in that room amongst us traumatized women that I have never felt before. I could turn to the person closest to me and tell her my darkest secrets, and she would simply laugh and tell me hers too. There were no masks to hide behind or people to impress. We were able to show up as ourselves and were invited to share the most broken pieces of our souls. As the night progressed and everyone had their turn to speak, we turned to music to pass the time. A girl had brought her guitar and asked if we wanted to hear her play. All of us, eager to hear, nodded and agreed. I don't remember if she was singing a song she loved or one she wrote. What I do remember is looking around the room again at all these girls, all of these people who were hurting and suffering. Yet, for just one very moment, we were all smiling, tapping, humming, or dancing to the strum of the guitar. And all I could think is, I'm going to make this world a better place for us. I have very big dreams, all of which are still centered around that main goal, making the world a better, safer place for SA survivors. This podcast is my first public endeavor of bringing that dream to life. One of the biggest challenges I want to overcome is the inability to talk about it. The elephant in the room, rape. We all know all too well that it's a topic most people avoid for many reasons. It makes some people uncomfortable, it brings up triggering feelings, and it can be terrifying. However, these people have these people ever considered how hard it is to not be able to talk about our most pivotal life moments due to their discomfort? That moment in our life that fundamentally tore down everything we've ever known about ourselves and the ones closest to us. That moment that then left us completely raw, covered in scars, and required to refigure out this newer, crueler, jaded world around us. In every situation, we get asked, what is wrong? We are expected to give the short answer and not the long one. The word rape has become so stigmatized that we can't even be honest about it for the fear of other people's reactions. I want to break that barrier down. I want to build a community of people who not only find comfort from hearing our stories, but find strength in it as well. From the moment I met you all, I feel stronger when I'm around you. When I'm in a space where I can freely talk, joke, and cry about my experiences to people who can both empathize and understand. This podcast is a safe space for survivors. It is a safe space for us to honor all parts of our lives, not just the comfortable ones. This is a place where we are transparent about our feelings, share helpful resources and information, work through our own symptoms of traumas, and hopefully spread a lot of joy to the people who sometimes have the hardest time finding it. Sexual assault and domestic violence are heavy topics, but it is pertinent that they not be silenced. Those days spent hearing stories and sharing my own amongst other survivors made me feel safe in a time where safety couldn't be found. I hope to extend that hope to others. And that's what I have written about it. And there's not a part of it that's not true. I think it is really vital to be able to talk about these things and to be able to share them in a group and to be able to find a community of people who understand you. And I mean, when you go into Planet Fitness and it has judgment free zone like written everywhere, but it's not. This is a judgment free zone. And I wrote it down before, but the first day we ever went to group, Tiffany, I don't know if you remember Maureen saying this, but it has never left me. When she asked us like what our story was and if we were willing to share and stuff, she said, "There's not a thing you can tell me that I won't believe is true. It doesn't matter how crazy, it doesn't matter how twisted or anything. What you tell me in here, I will believe you no matter what." And it's always stuck with me because I want everyone else to know that too about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to believe you. I'm going to believe your story. I don't care how complex it sounds because, my God, baby, if I understand one thing in this world, it's the complexity of situations. And I hope other people can start to feel comfortable sharing their stories too by hearing ours, because they are complex and they're not always cut and dry. And that's what we know about sexual assault, is the way that it messes with our brains is not normal. And how we act after is always going to be at least slightly jaded by what happened. And maybe I shouldn't say always. I shouldn't say always because I'm a firm believer in healing. I'm a firm believer in getting better, but there's not a day that goes by where that time in my life doesn't cross my mind. So to think that I'm living life in a way that's not impacted by it, I think is actually more delusional than just accepting the fact that this thing did happen to me. It changed me. I acknowledge it. And I have to live with it, but I don't want to feel like Atlas. I don't want to feel like I'm drowning. I don't want to feel like anything. I want to feel light as a feather despite it all. So I hope that we're able to do that.
I literally started crying when you were reading it.
I
I,
tearful.
She did.
it's coming.
I
So
was like, oh no.
yeah, because the first time the first time that I went to the Ocala Sexual Assault Center was in 2016. And long story short, I had a little bit of a mental breakdown and I was faced with an ultimatum. And one of the options were you could go to the police. I'm not going to say the other one right now. But so I went to the police to I don't even know what it's called.
Report?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Make a report. And that left me feeling totally defeated. But on the way out of the police station, a lady in the front gave me a flyer to the Ocala Sexual Assault Center and said that they meet on Wednesdays and that you should probably go. And I did. And
Technical difficulties.
So I went to the sexual assault center, and I won't lie, for the first, I don't know, at least few weeks that I went, which I went once a week. That's when the meeting started. I was like, I don't belong here. Like, some of these people have insane stories, and mine does not match up with those stories, and I just don't think I belong here. But I kept going because I had to, and to be honest, I had nothing else better to do. And any time that I told people in my life who were supposed to be supporting me, and they were to the best of their abilities, some of them were at least to the best of the abilities trying to support me, I was not feeling any connection. So I was like, well, I'll just keep going to this place. And then eventually, even the people who had like stories that didn't match mine in any way and made me, like rethink if what happened to me actually did happen, which it did. But like I started to see like fibers connecting. I was like, okay, hold on. That's really similar to what happened to me, even though, the characters in the stories are totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, so from 2016, 2017 ish to, what was it, 2020?
That's when I didn't move to Ocala until 2021. I think Tiff moved in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
So I went to group then from 2016 to like 2019, took a break, came back, and I came back not too like a few months before you guys came. And obviously I had already met Reese and everything, but it just from the first time I went to when you guys came, like I had totally changed. And then after I was there while you guys were there, I had changed again. Like my healing had like skyrocketed a lot each time I just kept going back. So I think even, you know, for people listening, even if it doesn't feel like you're connecting yet, just keep listening or keep going to group or keep, try to find your tribe basically of people who
Yeah.
understand what's going on, even if you don't feel like you're there yet. Something will happen and then it'll crack and you'll be like, oh, actually, this makes a lot of sense and this is helping, even if it doesn't feel like it's helping in the moment, because it won't, because it'll feel like shit. Sometimes I left group feeling worse than when I came in there. Like
Mhm.
I was like, wow, why am I coming here? I feel like ass. But then I kept coming back. There was something about it. I just kept coming back. And then eventually I was like, this is actually making me feel a lot better.
For real. Reese, I'm gonna go to you. Sorry.
Piggybacking off of Gigi too, I was in a really dark place around 2018, and there was my parents' friend, a social worker that had did the same thing, was like, here, this place, I'm going to take you to this place. And from the moment I got there, I really like was scared, and like I was like, I'm having all these memories I did not realize I had, and I'm really freaking out because up until that point I had left my situation and never looked back. And then when my miscarriage happened, it was like another traumatic event that triggered it. And then so from that, I was just, really messed up, and like I could not do anything. And at the time, I had a 2-year old that relied on me. So that made it even harder. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this place. And I had so much guilt, like from everything that I had been through, because I was always thought it was my fault. But from the moment I met Maureen, it was like it really does help having the certain people, and you won't find it, because I did it when I first needed help. I did not find the people that I needed help from. Like I did not find the right people. And then when I found Maureen, it was like it clicked that I was safe with her, and I was able to, no judgment was there at all, and she believed everything I said and got me therapy, and things like that, and that helped for a bit. Really coming to terms with everything that happened to me and realizing that it wasn't my fault and that I could get through it. But like Gigi said, I felt like shit for a very, very long time. Like it did not it's something about, yes, they were helping me, but the connection, like she said, wasn't quite there until we all met. And when we all met, it was like, yeah, I was still shy and still had trouble, getting out of my shell. But I mean, everybody here has lively personalities, so it really helps to have, like, when I met you guys, it was like instant, like, oh my God, they understand me. Like, they understand, like, what I've been through, and that, you know, I am not by myself. Like, I have people that, and yeah, like Gigi said, I had people in my life that tried to understand, like John tried to understand, and he tried to be as loving and supportive, but he was scared. He had never been through anything like that. He didn't know what was happening to me. So he was terrified, but that's all I felt like he saw was a traumatized person, and didn't see me for like what I could be, and like who I am at the time. And that's where you guys came in, that's where group came in, that's where therapy came in, to make me realize that I could grow and be better and like get better. Like, I didn't have to be in that dark place forever. And I feel like that's where you need the community, and you need to keep trying. And even though you want to give up and you really want to do, the bad thing, as I'm going to say, the bad thing, and I don't know how to like explain it other than just being in a hole. So it's definitely something that you definitely need to keep fighting for. If anything else, just keep trying to find your people, like as best as you can, because it will happen for you. Might take a while. It might be like really shitty for a while, but
My hope is that we are those people for people. I have something else to say that has to do with Gigi, but I'm gonna hold that back because I'm gonna go to Tiffany. But I did just want to add one short thing on to Reese. Um, Reese, I was talking about this with Tiff the other day, and I don't know if you realize it, but like that first meeting that we had at group, you were the one when Maureen said, like, who wants to share their story? And like, obviously, me and Tiff were like, brand new, no, we're really like, we did not feel safe yet. You were like, literally, I wish I could play back something that is stored in my memory and I don't have it on my camera roll. You were so confident. You articulated your story so well. You are the reason I felt so safe there to share my story, because you shared yours, and I'm forever grateful to you for that. Um, but yeah, it goes back to just like, I wish you could see yourself the way I saw you that day, because like literally I think it would even stun you. Um, I know we talk about how you're a Leo and you don't always feel like a Leo, but like when I met you, you felt like a Leo and you looked like a Leo and you came across as a Leo. And it was like, I really thank you so much for that moment. Like, thank you so much for sharing your story, because it really was what made me feel comfortable to share mine. And yeah, I'm gonna hop up over to Tiffany, and I'm gonna re-raise my hand because I have something else to say, but I want Tiffany to be able to talk about like what we're on subject of.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So to go back to sort of what Gigi was talking about, with the like you went to group and you were like, oh my God, some of these women have such horrible stories, like, and how does mine even compare? Like, I don't need to be here. This isn't the place for me. Like, this is a common thing, like comparing your story to others and sort of downplaying what happened to you in a way. And you're like, okay, should I really be feeling this bad because so many people have it worse? And I think that's a thing that, like I said, is common, but it's just so damaging to people because you can't compare stories and how they affect you, because everybody is affected by things differently. And just because somebody's trauma is subjectively worse than yours,
Yeah,
in
very much.
quotation marks, doesn't make your story any less valid. And I just want people to understand that, because I think, especially as women, we tend to like, um, obviously there's a lot of comparison because we're pitted against each other in a lot of society, but there's this tendency to put others before us and think that what we're going through is not as important. And it is. And like your story, everybody's story is valid, and it's um I just totally lost my train of thought. It left my head as I was saying it. But then the next thing that I wanted to say is that you were talking about how some days you felt like it was really good, and some days that you felt worse when you were leaving. And Reese said kind of the same thing, and I think that's also a common thing, because what people need to remember is that healing isn't linear. It's not like you start this healing journey and you're like, it's up and up and up and up and up, and you just continue to get better. When I first started my healing journey, I went from functioning to angry. Like, I was so angry. I woke up angry every single day. And then I got better. And we started going to group and started actually talking about the things that happened. And I got better, and I was like, wow, I'm not alone. I started working on things, and then it was like, oh my God, I'm depressed. So it's one of those things that instead of just like this, it is all over the place. So, and I think that's another thing that sort of gets people to stop going to places or stop seeking help, because they don't feel like they're getting better. But when you're in those places, just it doesn't last, or you can pull yourself out of it. And just remember that you're not always gonna be on that rising part. And then it kind of incorporates into the last thing, is it oftentimes gets worse before it gets better. And that's what I was talking about when I first started, like when I first started going to therapy, when I first started going to group. I felt the worst that I had felt in probably a decade, because you're starting to admit to yourself what happened. You're starting to actually face the feelings that it brought up for you. And I think that is also often a deterrent for people seeking help, because when they first start going, then they feel awful. But just keep at it. Keep going to group, keep going to therapy. If it's not working for you, if you don't feel safe, find a different one, because sometimes it takes multiple times to find the places that are right for you and to find the people that are your tribe. So
I feel like there was something you said that made me think of this. I think sometimes you don't have to speak about like your story or anything right away, but I
Right.
do want people to keep in the back of their mind that those feelings of like, oh, I don't belong here, I don't, my story isn't worth sharing. Sometimes you don't realize how strong or traumatizing your story was until you say it out loud to someone else. And then you say it out loud to someone else and you watch their face drop and you're like, or you just hear it, from your mouth to your own ears and you're like, actually, that was terrible.
Oh, it's pretty messed up.
Literally.
Pretty much, yeah.
If you can imagine your best friend or your sister or, somebody that you love with like that pure love saying that back to you, how would you feel? Like you'd be like, oh my gosh, you need help, you need a hug, you need, a blanket. Like, what do you need? Let me help you. And that's how other people are going to like receive that information. And if the person that you're telling, your story to doesn't, give you that reaction of that you deserve help, then find somebody else to talk to and give them space, because some people don't know how to react either. I feel like that's a big one, is some people really, just because they're uneducated, like they don't mean to. Some people are, ass, but some people really are uneducated. But if you say it to them, tell them your story. Ollie, please, shush. If you tell them your story, it's going to plant a seed in their head to maybe think twice before they speak. Or, so I just feel like you don't have to say your story right away, but always keep it in the back of your mind that it's a good thing and that you should talk, and just throw your, anxieties, which is easier to say, easier said than done, but throw your anxieties about it out the window basically, and just try it. And if it doesn't work with that person, go to another person, go to another therapist, go to another group, write it in a letter or something, but just try to get it out.
Yeah, and that's another thing is why I like to make sure that I share my story first, like she was saying, was because yes, I hate hearing my story over and over again, but it almost gives like it less power like the more I talk about it and the more I open up about it. And it's more also the fact that I want, because so many people carry this around and it's such a big weight to carry around by yourself, that I want to be able to take that and carry some of that for you. And that's why I really feel like it's important for me to, yes, this happened to me, but yes, it's important for me to say what happened because it may give them the strength to be like, okay, this person has been through it. This person has had this weight before, and I'm able to share some of that with them. And that way I don't have to walk around and feel like it's suffocating me or that I'm drowning by it. And that's where a lot of the reasons why I might be scared to say it and I might be scared to tell it. But the more I tell it, the less it has power. And I feel like that's what I want to get out to people too.
Perfect. Um, Reese, I literally everything you said felt that to my core. Like every time I tell my story, I feel better. Like after. And I hate every minute leading up to telling my story. I dread it. I ruminate on it. It's because it's all working its way around in my head. And it's like once I spit it out, like once it is out of my freaking mouth, I I feel better. I feel so much better. This is something I recently just did in therapy by doing my trauma narrative. It took weeks of my life and hours of my time. And each week left me feeling shakier and shakier because it was like I would get there and only have 2 hours to talk. But it literally, like, to for me to tell my story, especially this time around where my therapist literally wanted me to remember everything that I could remember, um, it just was going to take time. What happened to me was not like one sole event. It wasn't like one night just happened. It did, but to fully encapsulate everything that actually traumatized me, it took over a year of my life, almost 2 years of my life before I did something about that. And it goes back to like for me, the hardest part of my story still to this day was coming forward the first time, like the very first time where I was going to someone and saying this person raped me was the hardest thing I ever did. I wrote it in a letter first. The first thing I did was write it into a letter, and in that letter I wrote, this person raped me and I don't know if I'll ever say it out loud, because at the time I I did not feel like I had the strength enough to verbally acknowledge it because it felt like I could keep pushing it down. If I didn't make it real, it could stay not real, except it wasn't. It was impacting every single aspect of my life. And I wasn't able to do anything about that until I literally addressed that elephant in the room. And from there, it was kind of like I threw up everything in my life and waited for everything to fall. But when I say it is like, right, it's the thing I did that I'm most proud of in this world because I understand the degree of strength it took me to be able to do that. Literally don't ever want to have to feel that again. I want the honest truth. I find power in it, but I'm also well aware that I don't like that feeling. It was not a good feeling to feel like I was sitting on something. I said Atlas before, and as Reese said, like with sharing the weight and stuff like that, but I felt like Atlas and I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. And when I said it out loud, it was literally like I took some of that weight and I set it down in front of me instead of carrying it on my back. And that was one of the best feelings in the world. And then also going back to Gigi and Tiff and Reese, you all kind of talked about how you doubt your stories, right? Like until you were speaking it out loud and you're like, oh yeah, that was actually pretty shitty. You get in your head and you're like, you doubt that stories. I think it all has to do with self-compassion. All of us, I think, at very young ages learn to push ourselves to a point we shouldn't push ourselves. And within that, completely gave up the idea of self-compassion, gave up the idea of caring about ourselves more than other people, because trauma does that. Trauma wires your brain to put other people ahead of you versus yourself. And I think a big part of that is self-compassion. And really, I guess my only point on it, because all I wrote down was self-compassion, I think I had more thoughts on it originally, is just that I really hope, just as much as this is healing for an audience, like I said, symbiotic relationship, I hope we are all able to garner more self-compassion from this. It is literally the number one thing my therapist is working on with me right now. He is tired of my BS.
And I feel like also it's almost a way of taking your power back from the person that took it from you. When you finally open up and you talk about it, and each time you talk about it, and each time you talk to someone else about it, and they talk to you about their trauma, it's almost like a way of empowering each other and being like, this person did this and took your power away, but we can get it back. We can get it back. It takes time, but it will be worth it in the end, because you will come out stronger. Because the only way out is through. Exactly how they tell it. It's the only way out.
It's so funny that you wrote that down, though, because that's exactly what I had written down while you guys were talking, because it literally is taking your power back through the narrative of your story. And the more you talk about things, the more of the power that you have and the less power that this thing has over you. And it's funny that you were talking about you can't even talk about certain things or admit things to yourself, because there are still certain things that I can't say out loud. Like you said in your letter, you don't know if you'd ever say it out loud. And for a long time, I did not say it out loud, ever. I mean, you were the first person that I ever spoke to about what happened to me, and that's what led us to going to the group. And there's still certain things about it, aspects about it, that scare me so much that I will not, at this point, verbalize it. I'm hoping, obviously, to get to the point where that's not true, but
yeah,
but that's exactly what it is you're taking your power back from not only the person that hurt you, but also the memory of it, because that is at the end of the day, that is what's preventing you from healing and from moving forward and from telling your story.
I completely agree. And I just love you so much, Tiffany. I mean, I love you all so much. I just I really do think back. I feel like we were all fated to meet. I very much believe in fate. But Tiffany, we just really I feel like life threw us in a situation where it was either do or die, and we became best friends because
yes.
And you have literally been the most pivotal person in my healing. I, to this day, will never ever right, if you were not there for me when I'm right that day where I was like, hey, you need a roommate, and you were like, yes. I literally don't know where my life would have gone, and beyond that, don't know if I would still be here, because I needed to go. I needed to get away to find myself. And yeah, I can't wait to get into our story more, because I actually think it's so beautiful, and I really think it'll be a fun thing to talk about. Are all those little micro moments that led us to both getting to the point of being like, oh shit, we got fucked over in our lives. And then I'm actually going to backpedal and kind of change topics. So if anybody else has stuff to say on this subject, I'm gonna let them do that. Gigi, is yours on the yes, go right ahead.
I was just gonna say, everybody comes out with their story a little differently. And for me, when I came out. Word vomited out of me. I didn't know it was going to happen that day. I was not aware. I wasn't in group obviously yet. I hadn't been to a therapist. I hadn't talked to anybody about it. I was in a situation that was pretty low stress actually, but it was just the cherry on top of the things that I'd been holding inside for 4 years. And it came out and it exploded. So that's also like, if you hold things in long enough, just know it'll come out. It's coming out one way or another.
Yep.
So you should
100%.
decide how
Full
it comes out.
chills. I have
Mhm.
chills because you're right.
It's coming out, and it might come out in 15 years. Do you want to hold on to that for 15 years? For someone who
Sometimes
had
it
to
takes
hold
30.
Yeah.
exactly, but
Most times.
I held on to it for 4 years, and that was way too long for me. That was way too long. And then I listened to other people on how long they've held on to it, and I was like, I can't believe you didn't explode. And like, I'm so happy that you're talking about it now, because I exploded. Like, it came out, and I
That's it.
I didn't know the extent of what was happening to me until, I really started going to group and talking about it more. But I knew something wrong had happened, and I knew that I had been raped. Even if that was the only trauma that I understood, I was like, no, I understood that I said no, and it went on anyway. And so that's like immediately explosion. I said what happened to me, and then I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So I'm hoping also us talking about this, and hopefully we can provide some resources as well for people who, after they say it, they know where to go to next. 'Cause I didn't. It happened like in the morning,
Yeah.
and then I was like, the rest of the day, I was like, and now what? So confused. I didn't even think to look online, or I didn't even know when it happened to me. Like when I was raped the first time, I didn't even know what a rape kit was.
No,
I didn't know
didn't
that was
either.
a thing.
Nope,
I didn't
I
know
didn't
that,
know either.
exactly. I had no idea that that was a thing, and I could go and, you know, have pretty solid proof. I didn't know anything existed. Right. I'm excited that we can uh, give resources out to people, and just excited to start talking about it more, and excited to share my story a little more publicly, because the people directly in my life know what happened, or at least a lot of people do. But I don't mind getting into details, and because I think it's necessary, because I think a detail when you're telling your own story that you think isn't important, it is.
Is
It's an
yeah.
important. You might think it's a really small, minor. This could happen to anyone. It's not really, it's not worth. It is worth sharing, because somebody else will connect with you, and you need help with it.
Yeah.
You need to heal, and you're gonna heal. So you might as well get a head start.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're either gonna form a lot of scar tissue or you can heal. Like,
Exactly.
um,
Rip the Band-Aid off.
You
I
gotta want it though. You gotta really want it. You gotta really want to do the work.
do.
And I know that's really hard, especially when you're first starting out and you don't exactly know where to go and what to do. And you can go feeling really good one day and feeling bad the next day. And I even was guilty of taking a little bit of a break. But then I realized, oh man, I'm getting really bad. I need to go back. And that's when I went back. You know what I mean?
You shouldn't feel guilty for taking a break either,
Yeah,
though.
that's what I was gonna say.
Need
No,
to
not at all.
If you need to take a break, that's why, like Tiff was saying before, healing isn't linear.
No.
We're healing, we're taking a break, we're regressing a bit. You're never gonna be where you started.
Never.
As long as you took the first step, you're never gonna be where it started. So it doesn't matter,
That
how your healing goes.
that big, so like you kept using the word explosion, and
Mhm.
I think that was such a good word, because when I look back at that time of my life, like whenever it was like first bubbling out of me, I didn't have just one explosion. I had a series of micro explosions that were controlled just enough for friends and family not to realize, but were quite literally detrimental to my life. And they were all explosions. It was like tower moment after tower moment after tower moment. And it was because it was bubbling and it was boiling and it was about to go over the edge. And it's such a just a good word, I guess, is really all I had to say on that. And then I'm finally going to come back around to that second point I said all that long ago that I knew was going to completely derail our current subject. I want to talk real quick because this week I first on Monday tried to go to yoga, but then it just ended up not working out because the yoga instructor didn't show up. But it also happened to go over the time I was supposed to be at therapy, but me and my therapist had a miscommunication. So that wasn't my fault. But beside the point, when I did get to therapy and I was telling my therapist about how I was trying to go to yoga, she actually knew the yoga instructor, was super excited, but she forewarned me about the emotional release I might have while doing yoga. And it was funny because it reminded me of when you went to acupuncture, Gigi. I remember you going to a group and telling us about it. And I've had one moment in my life before where I literally felt like I had an emotional release. Like I did not have any control over my emotions in the moment. And literally all I could do was cry. Like all I could do was cry. And it was terrifying because I had no control over it. But my God, when I say I pray to God, I go to yoga and something in my body snaps and I get that release out of me. She also said it's hips. Sexual trauma is the hips.
Yeah. So
yeah. It made me
before I
think of you and I brought you up.
before I forget about it, number one, I miss my acupuncturist so much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back down there just so I can go see him. Second of all, I actually had one of those releases during yoga fitness kind of, and I like it really released. And I had intentionally been trying to go to yoga and exercise and work on my hips and stretch everything out and get all the chakras moving so I can have this release, and it wasn't happening for me. And I went to I was actually in my brother's place. He wasn't there, and I turned on TV and I saw Netflix that they had a like 10-minute yoga sessions or something. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but I worked through the first episode with it and it was really hard. And then I broke down crying. And this is only a few months ago. Like, so there is still a lot of crap stored in me. And I couldn't, because for years I had intentionally been trying to get it. And then I randomly clicked on a Netflix 10-minute episode and I sat there and then I started bawling my eyes out. And luckily at that point in time, after I had that crazy emotional release, like I had been going to group and therapy and, I had the resources to like know and the knowledge to know what is happening in my body right now, why I'm freaking out. Because before, if that would have happened to me before, I would have, try to wipe my tears away and suck it back in. Like, what am I doing right now? Even if I was alone, and this had happened to me before where I would be, having a shower and then bawl my eyes out. And I'm like, why am I asking for attention? Nobody's looking at me when I'm showering. Who is, nobody was there when I was doing this 10-minute workout because I don't like to work out in front of people. But nobody was there when I had this explosive reaction where I was just bawling my eyes out. So if you feel like you're, in that situation where you're crying and you're like, oh my God, I'm doing this for attention. Whose attention? Nobody, you know what I mean? Like your own attention. You probably should be paying attention to you crying right now. Because like looking back, there'd been so many times where I had just like started crying and I didn't really like to cry in front of people or anything. So that, like, I was contradicting myself. How can I not like to cry in front of people? And then when I'm crying alone, thinking you're doing this for attention, which it sounds crazy to me now, but it's a very real thought. And I'll find myself still doing that, just like with little things. And I'll be like, attention seeker. And I'm like, whose voice is that? Because it's not my voice. I'm not Get out of my head. I'm not seeking attention right now. Otherwise, I would be doing this in front. Otherwise, I would just go and do it as a job. Because at least then I'd be getting paid for it too. But when you're crying by yourself, you're not seeking attention. But
Yeah.
I definitely think when you do finally have that breakthrough where like something unlocks in your hips or in your root chakra or whatever it is, it comes big. Because yeah, it happened, like I said, it happened in acupuncture and it happened in that 10-minute Netflix video where I was by myself. And I was like, oh man, this is really working on my abs. Oh man. Oh, that's not my abs. Ow. Crying. Like instant tears.
Gigi,
And that's okay, because like I have them all the time. Like anytime that I have that big realization or like I'm triggered and it's triggering a memory from my trauma, I immediately start crying and I'm like, now I know what's going on. Before, I have literally been told I was a basket case since like I could remember, because I would have big moments like that and not realizing that no wonder I had them, because now it's been fucking traumatizing. Of course I'm gonna have like outbursts of crying randomly because I'm reliving something in my body, like something that my body is remembering, because like the book, The Body Keeps Its Score,
Yeah.
like it took me a long time to realize that I have to go through this part of breaking down to get to that release that I really needed. So really, it's honestly like
through.
Yep, and the only way is to thank yourself. Thank yourself for being that vulnerable to yourself to be able to let you get through that trauma that way. Because I have been more self-destructive. I could have done something that's really bad for me instead of just feeling it and getting through it, you know?
I do know. Tiff, do you want to go or do you want me to go? You go ahead.
Now I want you to go because I forgot, so I'll remember by the time you're
That's
done.
fine. Gigi, I was gonna say just before, I literally want your voice going through my head whenever I'm crying, like telling me it's okay to cry. Don't let
It really is though. It is. I feel like I still do sometimes. I apologize when I cry in front of people now because I didn't let myself cry in front of anybody. And now I let myself, if I'm going to cry, it's going to happen. I don't care where I am. I don't care who I'm in front of. But I notice myself apologizing. So now I'm working on that. Just don't apologize every time you cry. Because I cry a lot now. Like I can cry over everything, but I kind of like it.
I wish I did.
I feel like every single time, I feel like the more you heal, the more prone you are to crying, and then the more you are, okay with crying. Just let it happen.
Yeah,
and then I don't care.
I still fall into the I cannot cry in front of other people. I literally back to my destructive past, right? Somebody said self-destructive. I wrote it down because that was such a good word, because I was very much in a self-destructive phase before I went and seeked help. But also when I was especially in that phase, I would literally drink alcohol just so I could finally cry, because I could not feel my emotions unless I had an inhibitor that brought down that wall enough for me to feel them. Specifically to other people, because I was holding myself back in so many regards. I would get super drunk so I could communicate with people, because I couldn't do it sober. I literally could not do it sober. I would have rather been hit by a literal bus than had to express myself. Because I was so scared of what was going to come out of my mouth. Whereas I could get super drunk, know that Natalie was going to take care of it.
It's like a protection for yourself, basically. It's like it helps you get at that part of you that's been crying for you to let it out. Just as I'm here, baby. Let's go.
I would connect to her for so long. I'm not that way anymore, but for a very long time, that was the only way I could connect to the part of me that had any feelings. And it's because if I didn't turn them off, I was in a situation where death was my only other option. Except actually my third option was leave, which is what I went with. But at the time, that did not feel like an option for financial reasons, for the fact that I didn't know where I could move. I didn't, until that became a possibility, it literally felt like either acknowledge these feelings while drunk, or step in front of a bus, pretty much, because, or just not exist. I guess dissociation was the option I went with most days, which is why I had to get drunk in order to express myself, because I was just trying to float through life, because it was so awful down there. It was so awful to like be in my body at the time.
Yep. The other day, you know, I texted you and I was talking about that panic attack that I had. I was literally in the shower having a panic attack, and still in my head, I was like, God damn it, you're such an attention-seeking whore. Like, and I'm like, who was around? Like you said,
you're so mean to yourself.
It's a thing. I don't know.
It is. No, it is. I'm saying that as the voice that's trying to get you to be less mean. But absolutely acknowledge it, because like Gigi said, we all experience it. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, that's okay. That's it. I mean, it was literally that. And also going back to the inability to kind of express ourselves, it goes back to the trauma and stuff like that, but also it goes back to inability to emotionally regulate.
I wrote that. Yeah, I forgot to say it.
It's not a thing. Like, it's not a thing that people, especially sort of our generation, were taught very well. Well, you guys are all a different generation, but
I think it applies though.
But it's also not just generational; it also has to do with the family. But
isn't Reese technically in the same? Reese, you're a millennial, right?
Yep, 94 baby.
Yeah, I think Reese is a millennial and I am an elder millennial.
What?
Yeah, so
98.
98, baby.
Wow. 89.
You're old as fuck then.
But yeah, it goes back to an inability to emotionally regulate. So part of emotional regulation and emotional intelligence is you know, being able to express your feelings, being able to recognize feelings in other people, and being able to like it also has to do with like the conflict resolution type thing. So like when you're afraid of approaching these topics and saying what you need to say, it goes back to that, because you don't know how to regulate those emotions in order for it to be a safe topic, safe for you to say, a safe thing for you to say, and also you don't know how to resolve things that might come up from it. So also going to be an interesting podcast topic when we get to it.
Yeah, that was actually pretty much what I was going to say. So I feel like we have definitely been a little bit all over the place in this podcast. I think that is both kind of who we are, and a good thing, because we can't just keep branching out and everything. But I do want to just make it clear to the listeners, because I don't know if we actually even talked about this in the beginning. Our goal is to have a topic every single week, and we have other episode ideas and stuff like that too. But for the main part, like kind of have an overall topic. Like 1 week we could be talking about CPTSD, and we'll have one person presenting information on it, and then the rest of us will talk about it from there.
Discussion.
Yeah, a discussion like we did today, except today's discussion wasn't really centered around anything other than introducing ourselves. And we clearly have a lot to say, which is also why I think we're really good people to be talking about it, because it doesn't just stop after explaining it. There's so much that goes into the topics that we want to talk about, because they are complex and they are tumultuous and they are heavy. And we want to explore those things. We don't just want to like acknowledge its presence in the room and then pretend we don't see it anymore. We want to delve in deep and both help ourselves understand ourselves, help ourselves understand each other in this group, and then also help others who are listening understand themselves. We want to get to the point where maybe we can stream and open up actual live discussions on topics.
That'd be fun.
It would be so cool. So I did just want to throw that out there, just because I didn't think we like kind of prefaced that every episode is not going to be just so like all over the place
Random.
within our narratives. They will have topics, and
A little
we
bit of
kind of have,
structure.
yeah, they'll have more structure. They're not going to be rigorous because we know none of us work well under the vines of heavy structure.
Neurodivergent babies.
Yeah. And so that is like moving forward what it'll look like. We also have our own stories to share, and we will do that in our own time. Like I know Gigi is ready to share hers, whereas like I want to give myself some time, and then like Tiffany and Reese are going to take literally for us the same way we would respect anybody else sharing their story.
Yeah.
It is on our timeline whenever we want to do that. But we will also clearly, with the topics that we're discussing, be throwing in bits and pieces of our life and how that topic is relevant to our story pretty much too. So that is really like moving forward how I think episodes will be structured, with over an overall main topic, but then still like little conversations in between. We also plan on being very mindful of the heaviness of our subjects. It was Gigi's idea to kind of do like a meditated outro. That way we can all kind of breathe through it together, wind it down. Yeah, so like we want to outro with like a little meditation, a little bit of grounding exercises. Moving forward, we were discussing having intros to kind of like help hype ourselves up for it. At every single week, we will get better at what we're doing. So yeah, overall, we have lots to talk about. We have different subjects we're going to hit. We are always open to suggested subjects. We also want to get to the point where we can share other people's stories if they're comfortable doing that. We can have our own discussion centered around that. We can check in with those people. We want to build a community of support and safety. That is our biggest goal. We will do everything we can to monitor comments to keep it a safe space. And we really, the same way that we all kind of found each other, we're hoping more people can find us too and find safety within us, sharing our stories and speaking our truths and pulling our power back to ourselves and centering it there. And then also like expanding that to other people. Like my biggest goal in this world is to help other people, especially other people who have been through sexual trauma, because it's what I know, and it sucks. It sucks, and it's not easy to navigate. There's no clear guide. There's no right. My biggest hurdle was coming forward, but then when I came forward, there was no net. There was no net. There was nobody who I talked to who had any helpful advice for me on what was good for me. Further than that, the people I did come forward to, I was telling them how they are not helping me and how they could so clearly be doing things differently. And I want to be that guy.
Yeah, there's also another reason why we do it too, is because I'm sure that there are people out there that have not had this happen to them, that know people that may have lost their lives to this. And we really want to make sure that anybody who maybe wants to be closer to the person they lost, they can kind of understand like how dark it can be, and how sometimes society makes it hard for these people to get help and realize that they might have loved you, but they had a really heavy weight to bear, on top of the people that are trying not to commit suicide due to their trauma. So we are definitely trying to work with those people as well.
As well as people who maybe didn't lose somebody but do have someone in their life that experienced it and they need help navigating the conversation around it, because it is a hard subject and it is awkward for people who haven't experienced it. And oftentimes one of the first reactions is, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And so hopefully that'll help those people as well.
We'll have a whole podcast about that. I am excited to talk, to teach others how to respond to people who are coming forward, because I do think that people's response really, they won't make or break they can actually. I will say they can make or break the person who came forward, but I just don't think people realize how much is on the line to the person who is coming to you. And so I do think it would be really helpful once we get the opportunity to kind of like break down helpful ways to speak to, talk to, and treat people who are going through this. And if you were the person that they confided in, how to be a safe, comforting, helpful person in a situation that we just don't know how to navigate yet. I hope we can help people navigate that.
Okay, and then before we get off, I don't know if anybody else has anything to say, but I was just going to go through the social media stuff real fast so people can find us on other platforms and stuff too.
If you want to go over socials, and then we'll get into the grounding exercise, and then I guess we could also discuss our plan is to upload every Thursday. We do want to be consistent about that. We cannot guarantee all of us will always be there. We are 4 individuals living very busy lives. So
Yeah.
and on different time zones. So having like a time where all of us can meet at the exact time, it is absolutely the goal, but we don't know if it'll always be possible. But there will I think our biggest thing, at least when me and Tiff talked about it, I suppose I can't speak for everybody because I don't know if we've all talked about it, but just like that consistency of schedule, because we want to be a safe space for people and we want to be reliable. Our upload days are going to be Thursdays, and I think we can pretty much guarantee that, at least to some degree. One of us will be there for you on a Thursday.
Somebody. Okay.
Someone gonna be there.
Yep. So we do have an email set up for people who want to send in stories or anything like that. It's really easy. It's just talk about traumatized at gmail.com. We have a Facebook page, Talk About Traumatized Podcast. It's the same on Instagram and on X as well. So we'll be posting, like hyping up the podcast when we're getting ready to release an episode, and I'm thinking like some inspirational stuff too, and maybe some stories and some articles that are relevant to like what the discussion is going to be that week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also, I feel like if people share our videos or share our posts, even if you don't take something away from this podcast, just sharing it might help someone else or might inform someone to help someone else.
Yes.
I think getting the word out there is just important. Go, Natalie.
Yeah, so this is actually something I want to touch on. And I wish I had this statistics right in front of me. I know I can look them up, but it's really not that pertinent, because the truth is we all know somebody who's been sexually assaulted. Whether you're cognitively aware of that or not, there's not a person walking around on this planet who has not met somebody who hasn't been sexually assaulted or has been sexually assaulted. I don't know if I said that sentence right, but the numbers are so high, and that's just with reported rapes. And I think we all know, at least in this group, like that's not everyone. Like that's far from everyone. And so yeah, sharing is the best way. Like Gigi said, if this didn't connect with you, that's okay, but I guarantee you know somebody who could really use a support group, who is okay and comfortable talking about a subject that you might not be, because it's okay for people to not be comfortable to talk about it, but I don't think it's okay to let that comfortability or uncomfortability prevent you from helping other people find help. Like help other people find help. Let us help people. I want to be here as a consistent, safe person for people to share their stories, to listen to their stories, to provide a safe space for that. Because let's just be honest, like inflation is up, people don't have money, the resources are dwindling. We want to be here, at least as a pillar that is unmoving and unwavering for people who have been assaulted, or people who want to know more about the subject, people who want to be a safe person for other people. This podcast can touch everyone in different ways. Like I said, you don't not know somebody who's been assaulted, so you can take things from this and you can become a safe person for them as well. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Awesome. Then do we want to start wrapping up?
Let's some grounding.
Okay, so I want to start off by saying I thought about doing this. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
I thought about doing this while we were testing out a recording, because we were, we had a really long conversation, and in the middle of it, I was feeling like a little bit of anxiety rising. And
Mhm.
it wasn't really anything specific that triggered me or anything. I was just like, I can feel that, when I step away from this, I'm going to be triggered. And it's
Mhm.
okay to be triggered, because sometimes you have to be triggered in order to move on
Through
and grow.
out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, well, I feel like this is going to be beneficial for at least a few people, which is kind of the goal. And
All
I'm
of
not
us.
exactly. And I'm not one who's going to preach that I meditate every night, because I don't, because I definitely have the problem where meditating is hard. It's
Mhm.
really hard. But there are a few like breathing exercises and stuff that I think really do help. So we're going to get started on it. The first thing I want everybody to do, it doesn't matter if you're in the car or you're laying down or where you are, is tuck your hips so they push forward a little and straighten your back. Then roll your shoulders back, unclench your jaw, relax your eyebrows, and then we're going to breathe in for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, breathe out for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, and then do that 3 times. Ready? Okay, ready? In, and then hold it. 2, 3, and out. And hold it. And breathe in. And hold it. And out. And hold it. This is the last time. And hold it. And out. And hold it. And before we start moving around, I just want you to start at your toes. Start wiggling them to wake yourself back up. And then you can roll your ankle, or if you're driving, just move them a little. And flex your knees a little. Then warm up your fingers. Roll your wrists. Kind of shake your shoulders out. Unclench your jaw again. And just try to relax. And then drink some water. Because I have been noticing some of us have been drinking water during the podcast, and some of us have not been drinking water. So I really do think, even while you're listening to this podcast, remember to like take a drink of water or have a little snack, because we
Yes.
forget to do that. And it's
Mhm.
important. It is important for our emotional healing, even though it doesn't sound like it makes sense yet. It will.
It is.
It is.
Gigi, that was so good. I
Yeah, that
really
was really good.
appreciated that so much, and I do think we should do it every single episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cathartic, and I do think it's a really good moment we all need after talking about heavy
Mhm.
things.
I feel like
Yeah.
getting in and out of that space, like knowing how to set yourself up to go into a heavy moment, and knowing that you can, I don't want to say leave the heaviness behind, because it's not that easy at the start,
Mhm.
but at least trying to have a routine where, you're starting to understand, okay, leave that heaviness. Now I can go to the grocery store or pick up my kids or go to the
Mhm.
gym or watch a movie. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you can kind of
Mhm.
have that barrier, give yourself, what's the word? Boundaries.
Grace. Boundaries.
Give
Mhm.
yourself some boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. And a moment to breathe.
Mhm.
I am so happy. This was such a good first episode. This has been lovely. I cannot
We
wait.
did it.
We did do it.
We did it.
Yay.
And I think we're doing really good things for people with this, and really good things for ourselves too, because it's important to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I feel like this is just another way of us healing as well.
Like you said, it feels the most like going to group for the first time since
Yeah.
not being at group.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
So
sure.
I guess we'll be back next Thursday with a new episode.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yay. Perfect.
Okay. I
All
will
right.
see you guys